Now, which of those three do you think was more motivated? Let's break that down into a job function. One was motivated for the paycheck. The second was motivated to finish the project. The third was motivated to change lives. Which one, if you were to come back a year later, would still be doing that to a greater degree?
Welcome to ReedFlections, a podcast on life, leadership, and learning. I'm Art Calderon. I'm here with Reed Nyffeler. Reed is a husband, a father, a published author, a podcaster, and also a CEO of a growing global franchising security firm headquartered here in the heartland of America. We are in season 2, developing authentic and intentional leaders. Reed, we've been talking a lot about that this season. We started about why do you develop leaders, who you should develop, what capacities do leaders need, where in the organization can leaders grow, and now we're talking about how. How do you develop leaders? Episodes 20 through 23, where we started with demonstrate, then delegate. Currently, we're going to talk about motivate, and the next time will be operate. So motivate, we're talking about motivate. What must aspiring leaders know about motivating and engaging their teams?
Yeah, I think this is probably where leaders struggle the most, is because like, how do I motivate my team? Why aren't they motivated? What's going on? And I think what we're missing is the first two steps, the previous two episodes. Is first, did we demonstrate? First of all, we're trying to motivate them without the understanding of what our expectations are. That's what demonstration does. Second, did we delegate? We may have demonstrated, but we did not empower them. So they are not motivated because they're not empowered. So once we've demonstrated and delegated, meaning we've shown them what to do and we've empowered them to do it, that is when we go into motivation. So the first thing is, if you're struggling to motivate your team and you've not demonstrated what you expect to be done and you've not delegated or empowered them to do it, then how do you expect them to be motivated?
Right. You haven't been watching the podcast.
Yes. And so that is super critical as the third step. We have to motivate third, not first, because I think naturally we're just going to go give a motivational speech. So we'll give an analogy just to really set that in. Imagine a coach that never had a basketball or football practice, and they didn't put the people in position. So hypothetically, they've never shown them they've never demonstrated what a football play is, and they've not assigned positions. So they have not done demonstrate or delegate. Then they have their, Rudy rallying speech at halftime.
Yeah.
And they're motivating the run out in the field. And they run out in the field and they're super motivated, but they have no idea what to do, right? That is where most leaders operate. They try to give them this rallying cry without ever demonstrating and without ever delegating, without ever showing them what to do and empowering them to do it. Then you go to motivation. And so I think that's the first step. And so then ultimately, how do we motivate? That's the question that came first. We have to look what motivates them. So different things motivate me than almost everyone else in their ecosphere, in my ecosphere, I guess. For example, I am interested in learning the origination of things, right? It's very interesting to me to see why we're doing what we're doing, absolutely doing today, right? There's original piece. And a very simple one is an example of the space of a rail car, right? And so you look at a train and you say, why did they randomly choose, and I think it's 3 foot, 6 inches or something like that, or maybe 4 feet, something. I don't even know the number, but it's an odd number on the distance between the cars, between the two wheels on a train. And I thought, why would they ever select that? And so then what I realized was that was the distance of the chariots and horse and buggy and the wheel on the horse and buggy, which was already the beginning. So someone arbitrarily chose the width of 2 wheels way back in original time, and that became the ultimate rut, that became the natural distance for that space. And so then I thought, wow, that's quite interesting. And so as I further researched this is just an example of what motivates me and I find interesting to apply to learning. The wheels, when you turn them, because they don't have, train cars don't have a turn, it gives you a natural turn that's gradual enough that it won't dump over, right? When you're going at speed, but also will get you around the turn in a reasonable amount of distance, right? And so when they're turning it, you're not pulling it off the tracks or vice versa. I find that super interesting, right? And then I look at, okay, how many of our decisions, what do I take from that, which motivates me and I find interesting? What are decisions we just default to what was there without understanding why? Or what is, because we understand why in that origination, how are we going to apply that? And so when I understand why a leader is doing something or someone made a decision, I'm much more motivated to follow up with that, right? And so, as we look at a task, and so I'll give another analogy, and here's the understanding of a why around a task. There was this bricklayer, and there was 3 bricklayers there, and someone walked up and they said, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm laying brick." And the second, he walked up to the second person and said, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm building a church." The third person he walked up to said, "I'm changing lives."
Hmm.
Now they all had the same task.
Mhm.
One was doing what the task was.
Mhm.
The second was doing what the objective was. The third was doing what the long-term value was. And nothing changed. The task didn't change, but their perspective did. Now, which of those 3 do you think was more motivated? Let's break that down into a job function. One was motivated for the paycheck.
Mhm.
The second was motivated to finish the project. The third was motivated to change lives. Which one, if you were to come back a year later, would still be doing that to a greater degree?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And so if we are that leader and we do not communicate the vision, there's a much lower alignment. So how do I do that practically? I understand what their why is. When I'm building this organization, I look at 2 things first. There's 3 questions I always ask them. Who are you? Why are you here? What are your plans for this year? Because that ultimately is the indicator of what their why is. Who are you? That is your origination point. Why are you here? Ultimately, there's some reason, whether consciously or subconsciously, you got to this point. And then what are your plans? Who are you? Starts with where your character is. Then why are you here? There's got to be some purpose that has motivated you to have this conversation. Then where are you going? That's the direction you're likely going. Then I say, can I align with that person directionally where I'm going? And that's ultimately where their motivation comes from. Then I draw back to that. So in a franchising scenario, there'll be days where they're less motivated naturally. And I said, hey, you're not doing this for the particular task that you're held up at. You're doing this for the purpose you discussed with me at that beginning. You're doing this for your family. That's why you're here, to create a legacy for them long term. And the task of staying up all night is what is holding you back. So grind it out for the sake of your family. And that is how you maintain motivation, is understanding their why, drawing upon it in a moment of resistance or uncertainty, and then them going back to their why that aligns with your why.
Now, talk a little bit about the need for clear, strong communication from a leader to motivate the people that he or she is leading.
So I think, when we think of strong communication, we're thinking about a drill sergeant, right? The beatings will continue until morale improves, right? That's strong communication.
Right.
But to me, strong communication is effective communication because it worked. And that worked, and it didn't need to be strong-arming them. It's very clear and prepared communication that's effective. And it goes back to what I was just saying. If we understand what drives them and we associate the project, task, goal, vision with something that can align with that, right, then ultimately they'll be motivated to a much greater degree to see that through. And so it goes back to that second question, why are you here? Well, I'm here for my benefit of my family. I'm here for a long-term career. I'm here to leverage my skills. Whatever that case might be, that is inherently that pivoting point. And we want to say, how committed are you that, right? And my communication and that strong communication is that just what you're saying? Is that what you're doing? Going back to our previous season. Is this just your words because you think that that's appropriate to say in this environment? Or do you really live that way? And so your choice, is that your habit or your comment? And that is the strong communication, because now I'm ultimately calling them out. It's a strong communication because it's very direct and it's letting them make the choice. And I've simplified it. Are you just a sayer or are you a doer? Are you going to demonstrate what you're saying, or are you just merely going to say that so that you can get the applause of others? Are you going to show me, or are you just going to say it? And that's strong communication. And that's really what a leader's role is, right? And we look in scenarios where we have leaders and coaches or teachers. We just say, oh, I did well on my test. I studied, and then demonstrate that by taking your test, right? Demonstrate that. We're not just going to say because you said it. And so that's a strong communication. Like, oh, the leader's so hard on me. The teacher's so hard. They actually made me take the test that I said I did study for. Well, that's strong communication. You're holding them accountable, is what I would consider strong to what they are trying to work towards.
So it's important to tell the truth. It's important to be honest with that strong communication, right? Now, also, people are motivated in different ways. People are as different as people are. As many people there are, every one of them is a little different. So how do you balance that need for that strong, truthful, sometimes hard truth in that communication with how do you nuance that according to the different needs of the people? How do you balance that?
So I'm maybe a little bit more direct than others. And so one thing we have here is an intern program. my role as a leader, I believe, is to help the next generation succeed. And so I feel that many times that next generation is not getting clear or direct communication. And so we have a large intern program, and I want to be as direct as I could be. And I'm not going to motivate you. I said, you're not failing me. I said, you're not failing the organization. I said, you're failing yourselves. That the choices you make of, quitting quickly, not doing the work is actually failing you in your career. I said, I will move on after your end of your internship and go forward. Now, every time, and I speak in entrepreneur classes, I speak in that thing, every teacher, every person says that's exactly what they need to hear. Because why do I say that? Because I literally tell them, if I would have heard this at this age, I would have had clarity for 20 years later in life, 30 years later. Recognizing that I have a choice to make at 20 years old, that I can be a victim of my circumstances or a victor of my circumstances. The choice is mine. And if sometimes we have to provoke ego in that moment to help them clarify that, when in our entire lives did we get better as a result of being coddled versus being challenged? And, there's so many times in my life, I got better because I was challenged, not coddled. Someone challenged me to go lift weights. Someone challenged me to a race. Someone challenged me instead of, I will coddle you, I'll slow down so that you can just keep pace with me. No, I was challenged to be better. And I think that's our job of a leader. And it requires a direct conversation to challenge them that ultimately then they make the decision. There has to be an intrinsic reason that you motivate yourself. And a challenge, if you rise up from the challenge or you run from the challenge, that'll determine whether you're self-motivated or not. And that doesn't mean we have to take on every challenge. That means in the direction that we're running, if we don't take on a challenge, are we truly motivated internally? Or are we waiting for an opportunity? Are we coddled? And so that's something as a leader, we have to say, if they're challenged and they rise to challenge, that's ultimately how we get better. I've never been better in my life because I was coddled versus challenged. I'm always better when I was challenged. By a teacher or by a leader or by a coach, always better when I'm challenged, not coddled.
All right. So motivation is tough to maintain, right? Times change, situations change, demands, things come in and out of people's lives. What does a leader do to make sure that motivation doesn't wane over time? What are some ways that you can ensure or at least help the people that you lead to maintain proper motivation?
So again, very consistent through all the podcasts. It has to be habitual, not emotional. Our motivation, when it's emotional, will wane. Our emotions change. They're circumstantial in many cases, but our habits largely don't, right? So, I remember teaching our children how to brush their teeth. That was highly emotional initially. If you've ever taught your children how to brush their teeth, there's nothing more emotional in the moment. I have 2 teeth. And you're thinking, it's just 2 teeth. And they're baby teeth. They'll fall out anyways.
That's right.
It's super emotional. They're biting the thing. It's awkward. Whatever's happening, right? It's super emotional. But over time, that emotion wanes, right? I have 20-year-olds, and they don't cry when they brush their teeth. At least I'm not in there when they're doing it, I suppose. But it's super habitual. Right? And so it changed over time. Now, I was pressing hard into them to motivate them to brush their own teeth. And ultimately, all these little things, but eventually became habitual. And so then they haven't stopped brushing their teeth, to my knowledge, and we can double check with them.
I've seen their teeth. They look good. They look good.
Okay, so they probably followed that habit after they got over the emotion of it. And so what do we do as leaders? We get through the emotion to get it habitual. So we pass through the emotional to get to the habitual. And it goes back to what we were talking about on the demonstrate. We show the step-by-step process that would establish a habit. And then it's no longer emotional, it's habitual. And that motivation doesn't wane as frequently. Now we can put a little extra oomph in it one time, and that may be there. But if we have to always rely upon emotion for motivation, it will not be sustainable no matter what environment we're in. So we want to translate emotional into habitual, and then what are the processes to be able to do that? And then we get much, much better and more progress as a direct result of that.
Well, that brings us to the end of episode 22, Motivate. Thank you very much, Reed, for sharing with us your knowledge, your experience. Thank you, listeners. We appreciate you. Next up, episode 23, Operate. That brings us to an end of a section. Operate. Learn to function and work within the organization to achieve outcome and help others grow. In the meantime, I'm Art Calderon. Stay purposeful.
If you are a leader and you are saying, how do I motivate my team? The first thing to say is, did you demonstrate what you expect? Second, did you delegate? Did you empower them to actually take responsibility for that? And then third, are you motivating them emotionally, or are you developing processes to do it habitually? Because ultimately, if you motivate emotionally, you'll get a quick flame and that'll fade out over time. But if you do it habitually, you'll begin to build a fire that can ultimately motivate others and pervasively grow your organization. So think today: demonstrate, delegate, then motivate, and do it habitually, not emotionally. If you lean into those techniques, you will build your organization to be the organization and or the leadership role that you've always aspired to have. I believe you can do it.